Hey there, how you going? Stevie Richards here. You're looking at my Serge cleaning lady panel, which I designed the configuration for and built all the internals, mounted it in a standard AC 423 box by Bud Industries, and did the power routing internally, and it's a panel that's reasonably easy to travel with. The last tour I did through Europe and the US in 2018. I took this panel, and I'm sorry, 2019. I took this panel with me, and it was reasonably easy to deal with. I use a dual voltage control stereo mixer as the sort of final output point, which you can sort of see there. It has a stereo output, so it can pretty much go while I'm touring to anything like 2DIs or to a submixer. At gigs, I often maybe have some other inputs, perhaps like a spring reverb, which I occasionally use, which you can maybe see in the edge of that shot. I can hold up there. And I occasionally use contact mics in different ways, often as a noise source, sometimes for feeding back into spring reverb or into the analog delay, which you can maybe see in that shot as well, which is that one there. That's a deluxe Memory Man that I built. So occasionally when I'm touring and I'm doing gigs, I might request a mixer at a gig because I simply can't generally travel with a mixer, but that's kind of how I do it. And when I travel, I pretty much travel self-funded. I don't have any kind of government funding or arts grants or anything like that. So I make money whatever way I can as a full-time musician. Then I generally put that towards touring and travel. And hopefully kind souls that book me wherever it is in the world have somewhere for me to stay as well. It's, my apologies to Hector for the last time we were supposed to meet. I actually had driven from Los Angeles to San Diego to meet up with Trevor Hanthorne, and Trevor kindly drove me down to the border. I was on the way to do a gig for Hector in Tijuana, and I realized pretty much as we were about to turn into the street that drives up to the border gates that I had left my passport in Los Angeles. So I never made it to Tijuana. I never made it to that gig. I was really looking forward to coming to Tijuana. I do know one other musician from Tijuana, which is Pepe Mort. And I was, hoping to catch up with a few people while I was there and drink some mezcal, but it just didn't work out. So I'm really hoping that after, the COVID-19 times have sort of ended, that I'll finally get back to Tijuana. So I'm gonna sort of fade up this panel, and you can just have a listen to the patch that's going there, and then I can play around with it, and I can maybe talk about it a little bit. Now I'm hoping that I can just keep a decent level on this mic while I have the synth playing, but if I get drowned out a bit, I'm sorry. Okay, thanks. Okay, I hope everyone can hear that patch reasonably well. Now, the output of the synth is actually going into my sound card, as is this microphone. Then I'm actually recording into Ableton. I'm going to attempt to sync up the video and the recording, and before I send it to Hector, so I hope that works. Now, let's see. The patch you're looking at, it's, I suppose, fairly complicated. It's maybe a standard kind of randomized patch that I might do on this panel. It's involving, I suppose, if we go from left to right, I have oscillator. I have a dual transient generator, which is sort of like a version of the Serge DUSG. Then I have the SSG, which is a smooth step generator. Then I have the Wilson analog delay in the middle, which I'm actually not using at all in this patch. Then over here I have the resonant EQ, which I am using in this patch. Then I have the variable QVCF, the QVCF, which is a fantastic Serge filter. Then over here, the last part is the DCSM, the dual channel voltage control stereo mixer. This mixer has voltage control over gain, which I'm not using in this patch. But it has sort of general, I suppose, sort of gain controls for each channel. It has voltage control panning, which can be controlled here. Sort of like a bipolar switch setup. The voltage control panning inputs are here. The main inputs for the right and left channels are here. Then we also have some auxiliary inputs there, which I'm not using in the patch. Then some auxiliary outputs and the main outputs here, which are going up to my Fireface 400 sound card. Now, a lot of what's happening in this patch, I suppose, is, I might turn down a little bit. A lot of what's happening in this patch is probably coming from the more randomized elements in this panel. So, I suppose the beginning of what's happening with the randomization is that I modded this DTG, which is like I said, like the Serge DUSG. I modded that so that the gate and trigger inputs, which usually will kick off the cycling of the DUSG, I put in some switches so I can just flick the switch and it will cycle. So it just saves having to put in a few extra cables, you know, and frees up banana jacks for other things. So essentially that red LED you can see flashing there, this is, I suppose, the overall clock for this whole patch. So the gate output of that is coming over here into a gate input. Now, the reason this gate input is here, it's another mod, and the reason this is here is because I've actually set another mod underneath inside the SSG, which turns this into a random voltage generator, RVG, which is a Serge panel that's available, but through patching the noise and the SSG together, you can get it. So I've kind of hardwired that behind everything, and I can just flick a switch on and I get my SSG to become a random voltage generator. And that clock is also clocking what's happening within the surge noise, which I've sort of just got put on this panel in the middle between the SSG and the Wilson analog delay. Now, the outputs of this SSG, you can see that it's, you know, doing fairly randomized kind of, you know, flicking on and off. Now the SSG has a smooth side, which puts out a smooth voltage envelope, and a step side, which puts out a stepped voltage envelope, a little bit like sample and hold, but not quite. The output of my step side is going to several places. It's going over here to the left channel voltage control panning. So it's controlling the pan. So that's basically whenever that kicks, it's sort of really suddenly pushing the panning of that channel to, you know, one side or the other, depending on the setting here. Now the output of that step generator is also going to the voltage control of the scaling of the yellow side of this DTG. So basically, as the voltage control comes in here, depending on where this pot is set, it will make that go faster or slower. So that, you know, again helps to randomize the voltage that's coming out of here. Now that voltage coming out of there is going into the voltage control scaling of the oscillator, so it's changing the pitch of the oscillator depending on the position of this one here. Now the other place that this voltage control, this step side of the SSG is going is into the scaling of this other oscillator. So that's again making that oscillator's pitch change in a fairly stepped kind of way. Now from the smooth side of the SSG, that's going over to the right-hand channel panning of the output. So that's whenever that goes off and on in a more smooth manner, then that's panning that left and right as well. So, I mean, if you're listening to this on headphones, you would get a little bit of better idea of sort of what's happening there. Now, let's see where we go next. The SSG has two coupler outputs, which put out basically like a gate signal when the voltage, the signals go high, when it's sort of like a little bit hard to describe, but yeah, it sort of picks a combination of these two outputs and puts out a signal every time they hit the high point of their voltage outputs. So that hot coupler is going over, and that is voltage control of the Q of my filter. The normal coupler out is going to the voltage control input of the side that's actually clocking the whole thing. Now I've got that fairly set close to sort of 12 o'clock, so it's not really affecting it too much. And the other place it's going to is the voltage control FM of my second VCO. Now over up here, this orange banana is my sample and hold output from the noise. So the sample and hold output is going to the input of the left channel here with the yellow LED of the envelope generator, so it's sort of kicking it off whenever it gets a signal, or interrupting an envelope that's happening already. It depends on what sort of state it's in. Now the other place that's going to is myself. Yeah, okay. So that other sample and hold input's actually going to the voltage control input of the filter. So you know, when it gets a chance amongst the other things that are happening in the filter, that will kind of step the frequency of the filter in a sample and hold kind of way. Now, let's see. Over on the DTG, this is sort of more voltage control output to explain. The right side of that one is going over to the voltage control scaling input of that that filter. So it's kind of controlling, whenever this is kicking up and down, it's controlling the overall sort of frequency of that that filter. And so again, depending on what state that filter is in, it'll, you may hear that effect or you may not. Now, the gate output of that yellow LED side of that DTG is going over here to the trigger input of the filter. So that's pretty much sort of like pinging that filter whenever it gets a chance. So you can kind of hear that with that kind of wood blocky sound, pretty much coming from that gate. If you can hear that sort of wood blocky sound on the filter. Yeah. Now, I might just turn that down and you can have a listen to what the other thing is coming out of this right-hand channel. Now what this is the output of the resonant EQ. The resonant EQ has this saw of the first oscillator going into it. It's there. It's actually set at the moment because I've set up a switch and I'll put an internal circuit into this resonant EQ, which has a feedback circuit in it. Excuse me. So yeah, which is quite a sensitive feedback circuit. If you kind of get it to a certain spot, it'll really kind of start to feed. So once it starts to feed like that, you should be able to actually hear quite well if you have headphones on that panning that's happening to that. It's going from ear to ear. I'm hearing it in my headphones anyway. So, but yeah, when a res EQ is feeding back like this, it's super sensitive to any changes in any of the frequencies. So, you've got frequencies from 29 hertz, 51 hertz, 115, 218, 411, right up to about, I think it's 11K. Yeah. So if I just tweak one of these lower frequencies, you'll hear a really big difference. So. So yeah, it's a pretty interesting effect. So I mean, the way I use it quite often in a patch is as a noisy kind of background noise. It's also sort of susceptible on the input to some interruption by control voltage. If I take this patch over and put it on the output of the hot coupler, because this is a very hot voltage output,
you can actually
that interrupting. That's interrupting the the whole signal of the output signal of that resonant EQ now just coming in through the input, which is a really nice effect. You can hear that quite well. And that's getting panned all over the place by the the randomized elements coming out of the FSG and I like that. It's great. So I might just dial up the oscillator coming out of the filter now. I mean, having noises like this, having noises like this coming out of a panel, I think in a live context, you're always going to be faced with just challenges about how much, because essentially, if you can see where my two fingers are, you're mixing straight out of the panel. So you're, you got to make that decision really in a live context as to what you're going to send out to your mixer or to your, DIs. So, I suppose you've got to make a few decisions, maybe like a front of house mixer would at a gig. You've got to think about what you want to kind of portray, what do you think is kind of going to be the dominant sound, and which one's going to be the most aggressive, and how much you want to have that really dominating mix. But yeah, and then sometimes so if one is more aggressive than the other, or I'm not liking what they're doing, then I'll just start playing with it, like. I mean, generally for me, at a gig, this is generally what you're going to see if you come to see me play. I don't really have... I think when I'm traveling, I don't have the capacity to be dragging along multiple panels, because I'm pretty much just traveling with a bag and having, restrictions on weight. So, I mean, I think I've always done it for probably the last 10 years or so since I've built my first Serge panel. When I built about 9 of them over that time, but excuse me. I've always kind of looked at trying to do every single thing that I do at a gig from a single panel, and so I don't know, maybe the way I've played has kind of formed itself from that whole thing. I've just made decisions about, okay, so I only really have, some envelope generators to create melody, within my oscillators, and, I only have the gate outputs from them to kind of kick off other envelopes, or, trigger things like the SSG. And then, how can I modulate those signals or chop those signals up, or, interrupt those signals by using the different elements in the one panel. And, because these panels, it's not like Eurorack where you can just sort of whip a module out and put another one in. You have very much a small palette and a fixed palette of sounds to work with, but I've personally always enjoyed working that way, because I just I like the challenge, and the things that I built, I mean, in the early days, I don't even know whether I built them particularly well, and I certainly, when I first began playing, didn't know how to play them well, and I still don't believe I'm any great kind of synthesist, but I tend to just go with what the panel presents to me, and it's more like that I'm interacting with it, and I'm attenuating something that may be a bit too overblown and might hurt someone's ears. But it's to put a label on it. I suppose you're going to call it machine-led practice. Like I'm very much machine-led. I'm very much led by what my panel just presents to me, and I maybe have some knowledge about how to generally set up a few things, but I don't always set things up the same, and I think you discover things as you go along, and you see things which will work and things that don't. And generally, if something's not working, it'll tell you quite loudly that it's not working. So, yeah, that's kind of how I go about it. So, yeah. I suppose I should explain just a tiny little bit more. The first oscillator saw output is pretty much only in play here to provide sync with the second oscillator. As you can see, it's going from the saw to this grey banana, and on Serge, those grey bananas on the oscillators are for sync. The sync on these works quite well. Sync on the old CGS 48 that I had in my other panels didn't work quite so well, but these ones work well. Both of my oscillators, you can see, are actually in low mode, so they're pretty much functioning not much more than fast LFOs at the moment. They're not actually really functioning in a particularly melodic way at all. I mean, there is a pitch coming out of there, but a lot of the voltage control will push it down into LFO sort of territory. And I mean, during a gig, I do flick around with switches and change oscillators from high to low, and even switch on and off sometimes the maybe the second cycle here, or I'll be changing things. I mean, I generally am constantly changing and constantly moving when I'm performing, so I don't generally just sit at a gig and stare at my panel and let it self perform, which with a patch like this it quite easily could, as you can kind of hear. But yeah, so I mean, it might be sort of time for me to put the mic down for a while, and I'll just play, and then maybe I'll come back and have a talk a little bit later. Okay. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and I hope my explanations made a little bit of sense. I know that not everyone out there is kind of au fait with the whole Serge thing, but I don't know. Hopefully, most synthesizer concepts in general are reasonably similar in the analog realm. You know, the envelopes do what envelopes do, and oscillators do what oscillators do, etc. Yeah, I played around, you know, a lot with the speed of both envelopes in that patch. I slowed the clock patch right down, so it meant that the action from the SSG pulled right back, which meant the panning pulled right back. Yeah, I'm sorry that I had a few volume peaks here and there. I'll have a look at the sound file when I pull it out of Ableton. I can probably compress a bit of that stuff out, but yeah, I really hope that you all enjoyed it, and again, thank you for the invite, Hector, and I hope everybody has a great weekend, and you know, has lots of fun, and yeah, learns a lot, and um, I'm really hoping that you know, sometime in the next year or so, if COVID kind of becomes under control and we can all start traveling again, I'm really looking forward to, to coming to Tijuana and yeah, catching up and visiting some people. So yeah, enjoy Tijuana SynthCon 2020, and hopefully see you in the future.